Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. I'd like to thank the Ambassador for the UAE to Kenya for the invite yesterday to the UAE National Day. Rather grand affair, and they served dinner as well. Normally you only get bitings at functions like this, so it was good company. Thoroughly enjoyed myself, thank you. I also thoroughly enjoyed this morning. I had attended the Safaricom True Value Report release in association with KPMG. I'll come to some of the details of that later. But a very interesting methodology of looking at the total economic impact of a company such as Safaricom. And they're reckoning it's 9 to 10 times earnings. There's a link for the True Value brochure, that's near the top of Rich Wrap-Ups. And if you haven't had a chance to watch Kiprono at Mindspeak and or the Q&A session, please take a look. Macro thoughts, we're all waiting on Janet Yellen. Home thoughts, back to Mario Vargas Llosa. We invent fictions in order to live somehow the many lives we would like to lead when we barely have one at our disposal. Because of literature, we can decipher, at least partially, the hieroglyphic that existence tends to be for the great majority of human beings. Both powerful comments. Love his books. A tornado takes off from RAF Akrotiri hours after Parliament approved airstrikes in Syria. Found that in the Independent. British warplanes have launched their first airstrikes against IS militants in Syria hours after Parliament authorised an extension of bombing to the country. 4 RAF Tornado jets took off from Cyprus equipped with a combination of 500-pound paveway bombs and Raptor surveillance pods, according to a BBC correspondent on the ground. A pair of jets returned to the base at 3 a.m. without their weapons. My conclusions are absolutely no one has a strategy for Syria other than the Russian president. I think the others are all vultures, all seeking to feast on the carcass. Putin wages war on Turkey with trade in crosshairs. Hours after Turkey announced it had downed a Russian jet last week, Putin made his first move targeting Turkish goods. Other measures soon followed. After imposing lengthy additional border checks on Turkish goods, Russia then slapped bans on its vegetables and restrictions on its airlines, in line with a pattern of punitive measures levied on countries after geopolitical conflagrations. And while Russia isn't alone in using the strategy, it stands out for the speed and breadth of its retaliatory steps. It's simply economic pursuits for political reasons. While Russia's consumer watchdog frequently cites health and safety risks to justify product bans, Turkish businesses are being held hostage by that nation's leaders, Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev said. And then they also filed proof yesterday that Turkey is involved in the Islamic State oil trade. Russia's defense ministry said on Wednesday it had proof that Turkish President Erdogan and his family were benefiting from the illegal smuggling of oil from Islamic State-held territory in Syria and Iraq. Moscow and Ankara have been locked in a war of words since last week when a Turkish Air Force jet shot down. At a briefing in Moscow, Defense Ministry officials displayed satellite images which they said showed columns of tanker trucks loading with oil at installations controlled by the Islamic State in Syria and Iraq, and then crossing the border into Turkey. The officials did not specify what direct evidence they had of the involvement of Erdogan and his family, an allegation that the Turkish president has vehemently denied. Turkey is the main consumer of the oil stolen from its rightful owners Syria and Iraq, according to information we've received. The senior political leadership of the country, President Erdogan and his family, are involved in this criminal business. That's the Deputy Defense Minister. Maybe I'm being too blunt, but one can only entrust control over this thieving business to one's closest associates. So pretty hard-hitting. And I think the case is largely Poland. Israel extremely nervous over Russian operations on its Golan border. Apparently the Russians have moved right up to the border now, and the Israelis are nervous that this will give a cover to Hezbollah and others. German intelligence agency sees risk in Saudi defense minister's thirst for power. Germany's foreign intelligence agency says Saudi Arabia's ambitious defense minister could endanger the country's ties with regional allies by attempting to cement his place in the royal succession. The BND spy agency says Deputy Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who's second in line to the throne, and his father, King Salman, are trying to establish themselves as leaders of the Arab world. In a memo published Wednesday, the agency said the Saudi leaders' efforts have replaced the royal family's previously cautious diplomatic stance with an impulsive policy of intervention. BND cited the country's involvement in Syria, Lebanon, Bahrain, Iraq, and Yemen, and were meant to prove that Saudi Arabia is prepared to take unprecedented military, financial, and political risks to avoid falling behind in regional politics. I said this a couple of days ago when I actually cited Mohammed bin Salman. The point I was making is that, a 30-something prince is risking the kingdom, I think. German two-year yields deep in negative territory ahead of Mario Draghi today, where it's widely expected he will cut the deposit rate and ease further. Euro 105.55 now, dollar index 100.20, Japanese yen 123.48, Swissy 102.16, pound 149.32, lost its grip on 150. Aussie, pretty firm, 0.7325. India rupee, 66.665. South Korean won, 1164.24. Rial, 383.02. Egyptian pound, 782.95. South African rand, 1436.26. Let me put up a 3-month chart of the dollar index. This is near a 13-year high. Euro dollar, breaking down again, going towards parity. Gold, last trading at 10.50, and triple digits is just $50 away. Crude oil, last trading at $41.14, getting a bit of a pop ahead of OPEC, but it traded below 40, I think, yesterday. Rough diamond prices have fallen about 18% this year and are heading for a 6th straight quarterly decline. Longest losing streak since at least 2004. Let's go on to Africa. Need to buy an aspirin. If you're a Zambian, it will cost you. The Bank of Zambia's currency headache just got a lot more expensive. The price of aspirin has climbed 34% in the past year as the currency's plunge pushed up the cost of imports, according to the Zambian Statistics Agency. Annual consumer inflation rate jumped to 19.5% in November and is set to breach 25% next year. 2016 is going to be really hard for Zambia. It's an election year, and obviously voters are not very happy with living costs escalating so much over the last few months. The price of copper is at 6-year lows, and Zambia depends on copper for 75% of FX inflows. Lower rainfall also translates to less electricity generation in the country, which relies on hydropower for about 95% of supply. Yields on Zambia's $1 billion of Eurobonds due in April 2024 have climbed 262 basis points since the beginning of July, reaching a record 12.7% in October. The central bank has used almost every tool at its disposal to bolster the currency of the nation. That imports everything from drugs to steel sheets used for roofing. Measures have only provided temporary relief. The kwacha could fall to 14.50 before recovering in 2016. This is Barclays. Um, Aid from the IMF would also be crucial. I'm expecting President Lunga to dial up Madame Lagarde sooner rather than later. Very difficult time in Zambia. Debt service costs are set to rise to 20% of government revenue in 2016. So pretty frightening when you look at it. They borrowed heavily in hard currency and the currency has fallen out of bed. South Africa and China signed deals worth 94 billion rand, $6.5 billion during talks between the two countries. President Jacob Zuma said on Wednesday, adding that relations between the two nations were at their best ever. South African oil share up 2.15%. Dollar rand 14.3626, but I think it's headed lower. Egyptian pound 783. Egyptian EGX 30 down 24.02% this year. Nigeria reserves have dipped below $30 billion for the first time since July. I think they've got their finger in the dike, as I've said previously. Just because they've managed to keep it in more and more holes doesn't mean that the tsunami's not coming. MTN Nigeria's fine was cut 35% to $3.4 billion as its local CEO quits. This was previously $5.2 billion. And $5.2 billion was more than MTN's total sales in Nigeria in 2014 and the equivalent of about 37% of the group's total revenue. And it left a very uncomfortable feeling about what exactly was going on there in Nigeria. Nigerian oil share is at a 3-year low, down 21.26% this year. Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index down 12.7% this year. Trade between China and Africa has slumped 18% in the first 9 months of 2015 versus a year earlier, the largest decline in China's trade with the world's continents, according to China's commerce industry. Republic of Congo, Angola, Mauritania are African nations most exposed to China's slowdown because almost half of their exports go to China. Oil accounts for the bulk of exports from Congo and Angola, while iron ore makes up more than 40% of Mauritania's exports. There were some bright spots. Oranges imported from Africa surged 309%. South African wine shipments jumped 84%, and coffee from Kenya rose 30% in the first 9 months. China's exports to Africa have done better. Africa has become China's second biggest overseas market for contracted engineering services. So it's a pretty interesting situation there, and I think what's clear to me is that both President Mugabe and President Zuma are relying heavily on Xi Jinping putting his hand in his pocket. The weighted average for 182 Treasury bills was 10.092%, and for 364 days, 11.934%. You will recall we hit 23% in the 1 year not too long ago. About 44,300 depositors, or 89% of the total, will receive as much as £1 million each. This is the central bank governor Draghi told reporters on Wednesday. Total amount to be reimbursed is about 8 billion shillings. Asked when the Imperial Bank will reopen because Imperial shareholders have yet to provide adequate capital to recapitalize the bank, Draghi said, "I have no idea, absolutely no idea when it will reopen." Some details from that True Value report release I attended this morning. Safaricom is the first major company in Africa to monetize and publicly communicate the value it creates for society in this way. Value Bridge above shows that the total Safaricom created for Kenyan society in full year 2015 was estimated at around 10 times greater than the actual financial profit the company made in the same period. Safaricom's operations generated 144 billion shillings in additional direct and indirect economic activity in that full year. If the wider effects on the economy are included, this number increases to 315 billion, or 6% of Kenya's GDP. 112,000 direct and indirect jobs. Wider effects, 682,000 jobs. helps to alleviate poverty. 5% of additional household income it generates flows to low-income households. A lot of attention to it on M-Pesa, where this KPMG Safaricom report estimated total societal value of 133.8 billion during the full year, 4 times the M-Pesa transaction fees earned by Safaricom. Very interesting report. Do have a look at it if you get a chance. Kenya shilling 102.20. Nairobi all share down 11.47% this year. Bounced just over 0.5% yesterday. NSE 20 up 0.29% yesterday. Down 21.96% year to date. Thank you so much for stopping by. Thoroughly appreciated.